The World Health Organization is stealing America's sovereignty right under Americans' own nose. Thank you, Joe Biden. That is the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And before I get into this all so important topic of the World Health Organization and whether America should be part of this group anymore, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, that is the online platform for your faith-based podcasts, or at washingtontimes.com. Just go there, go to that website, go to washingtontimes.com, scroll to the bottom of the page in the newsletter section, click on it, find my newsletter. There it is, right in front of you. Cheryl Chumley, Bold and Blunt. Click on that and subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Delivered to your email box. Contains my commentaries that I write all day, all week long at washingtontimes.com, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcast. You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are offered. The World Health Organization and America. Not exactly a partnership made in heaven. Do you remember when Donald Trump was president? Yes, I know, after a couple of years of Joe Biden, it seems an eternity since we had normalcy in the White House. But anyhow, go back in time, take a minute, collect your thoughts. And remember when Donald Trump was president and we saw headlines like this from the Wall Street Journal. Trump moves to pull U.S. out of World Health Organization in midst of COVID-19 pandemic. The exit, the Wall Street Journal went on to write, won't take effect until next July. And of course, this was penned in 2020. Biden says, however, the U.S. would remain in WHO, in the World Health Organization, if he's elected. So Donald Trump had in works plans to remove America from the World Health Organization. Joe Biden, merrily in the White House, came along and put a stop to those plans. Why? Simply put, Donald Trump was America first. Joe Biden is America last. Joe Biden cares more about China interests than he does about America's interests. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, as we all learned under the coronavirus pandemic, except, of course, if you're a Democrat loon, a far left loon, who refuses to see the truth, whose eyes are blinded by deception. As we saw under the coronavirus, the World Health Organization is pretty much controlled by China and Bill Gates, which is another way of saying by China. And America, sadly, sad enough to say, America is a top funder of the World Health Organization. I think America is the number 1 funder of the World Health Organization, followed by Bill Gates as the number 2 funder of the World Health Organization. That's what the figures said. That's what the data said about a year ago. I'm not sure if right now, as I'm speaking, that order is exactly the same. But America, nonetheless, is a top funder, continues to be a top funder of the China-fawning, China-loving World Health Organization. So why? Why are we funding an organization that puts a nation hostile to America's interests over America? Why are we continuing to fund this? Because we have, again, in the White House, a president who cares little for America and greatly for China and has thrown down with the globalist interests like the entire Democrat Party and, sad to say, many in the Republican Party. And so that's why we have billions and billions of American tax dollars going out the window, going out the domestic window into the hands, the greedy special interest elitist bureaucratic hands of global entities like the World Health Organization, which in turn then turns around and fights America and cripples our sovereignty. And this is what we're facing right now. If you look at what the World Health Organization is trying to do on the heels of the coronavirus, you will see very quickly how dastardly this organization is to America's interest, to America's sovereignty. About a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer than a year and a half ago even, the World Health Organization came up with this great idea to have the nations of the world sign on to this treaty that would have allowed the director of the World Health Organization, no friend of America, by the way, to declare a pandemic in any corner of the world that he so chose, and then not only declare a pandemic, but unleash the forces of specially chosen doctors to flock to that area of pandemic and work, and when I say work, I put that in quotation marks, air quotes, to work, collaborate, partner, all air quotes, with the local governments, the local bureaucrats, the local health officials to decide best how to contain this so declared pandemic. So, if the World Health Organization, perhaps, wanted to declare a pandemic in, say, Florida, then the global entity would send all these so-called medical experts to the corner of Florida where it had declared the pandemic to work with the local bureaucrats down there to close down operations, to close down activities, to close down all types of economic activity in schools and churches again, just like we saw under the coronavirus, until the pandemic had been contained and it had been declared safe. This is the kind of power in the hands of a bureaucrat like the head of the World Health Organization that would pretty much mark the end of America and American sovereignty. Because anybody who has followed Bill Gates for a while, read his latest book, How to Stop the Next Pandemic from Happening, How to Beat the Next Pandemic, whatever it was called, I forget. I do have it on my bookshelf somewhere. And I read with interest how he plans to use the next so-called pandemic to control the world. But anybody who has followed Bill Gates or read Bill Gates' writings in his Gates Notes or read his recent book about how to stop the next pandemic from ever happening again knows that the way to control humanity from the perspective of these elitist bureaucrats is to use health scares to shut down activity in the same manner in which health scares were used to shut down activity using COVID-19. COVID-19 was sort of the test ground for what's to come. Now, the World Health Organization has this treaty that would give the World Health Organization complete power and jurisdiction over the governments of the world in order to stop any emerging declared pandemic from spreading by taking whatever regulatory controls the World Health Organization's carefully chosen sect of scientists deem necessary, by taking those steps to control the spread of the next virus. What this means is total top-down control on citizens of the world's activities based on World Health Organization dictates. If the World Health Organization decides that America now has a new emerging virus that needs to be contained, then under this treaty, the World Health Organization would have utmost right to tell American citizens how to deal with that virus, which means stay home, stay out of work, stay out of church, shut down the schools, do all the things that we did under the coronavirus that have been proven futile, needless, senseless, government overreach, and yet this is the power that we would be handing the World Health Organization under this treaty. Now, Joe Biden, a year and a half ago, wanted to sign on to it, and thankfully there were some in the conservative side of things that saw this coming and alerted the citizens of America to this dastardly deed he wanted to do in the dark, oh so sneakily, and it was stopped. But the World Health Organization has not gone quietly into that good night with that treaty. It is still out there. The World Health Organization powers who be are just biding their time, waiting for the moment where they can actually get America and all the other countries of the world to sign on to this treaty. That would be the end of American sovereignty. To put the healthcare decisions, the medical decisions, in the hands of one bureaucrat at the World Health Organization is pretty much anointing a king of the world. I'm pretty sure that doesn't fit in with the general theme of our Constitution. And yet, this is what the World Health Organization is marching toward. This from who.int/news, the World Health Organization's news website, in March. This headline: countries begin negotiations on global agreement to protect world from future pandemic emergencies. Let me read a little bit of this. Countries of the World Health Organization, which America, thank you Joe Biden, is part of, have begun negotiations on a global accord on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response using the zero draft, that's in quotation marks, as a basis for negotiating an agreement to protect nations and communities from future pandemic emergencies. Don't you love how bureaucrats always say they're protecting us as cause and justification for controlling us? That's just the language of bureaucrats. So check this treaty out. Go to the World Health Organization's website and check out this treaty for more of its specifics. But just be alert to the dangers that are coming under this White House administration that is all in for what the World Health Organization wants to do. Thankfully, we do have some alert, patriotic Americans out there who are busily, actively fighting against this takeover of American sovereignty. And my guest today, Frank Gaffney with Center for Security Policy, is one such patriotic American. Frank, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
The pleasure is entirely mine. I enjoy our visits when you come to my show, and it's a delight to be able to reciprocate.
It's always an honor to be on your show, and I'm so happy to have you here because there is so much that is going wrong with this Joe Biden administration. 15 minutes just scratches the surface. But let's talk about what you found is happening in Joe Biden's administration. You're calling for a defunding of certain positions that he has appointed. Can you explain?
Look, the challenge that we're facing, and you are one of the most thoughtful and, I think, astute observers and commentators on all of this, is there are a lot of people in the Biden administration who are, well, to use the colloquial, playing for the other team. By that I mean, in particular, the Chinese Communist Party.
Yep.
They're Marxists, they're other assorted leftists, but they seem to have in common an enmity towards our nation that is extraordinarily dangerous under the best of circumstances, and these are not the best of circumstances. We are, as you know, I fear, at the cusp of a shooting war with the people that they are compromised by, at best captured by, probably more accurate. And you cannot possibly, either deter or successfully win a conflict under those circumstances. It's just not possible. So one of the things that we're proposing, and it's a centerpiece really of a new book that I've just published entitled The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World, is that we have to address this issue of elite capture. And of course, as you know, Cheryl, it's not confined to the Biden administration. It's not even confined to the United States government. It's been happening for decades across our society, academia, the media, you know that very well,
Yep.
Our pop culture, business, finance. It's part of the strategy that the Chinese Communist Party has successfully mounted against us.
And what I like about what I was just reading that you wrote a couple months ago is that it was very insightful. Nobody else is reporting on this. Back when Barack Obama was president, we had the rise of the czars, basically, where you had the green czar and business czar and so forth, and all these unelected, unaccountable to the people leaders that headed up the cabinets and so forth. And you found that under now Joe Biden, Susan Rice has taken a critical role in this new czar-type atmosphere that you label as commissars akin to the communist countries of the world.
Yeah, well, in this case, they've taken it sort of the next step, and that is they've not only created these positions that are wholly unaccountable. Susan Rice as an example, is the domestic policy advisor, but she's got a much bigger portfolio than that, including the institution of literally commissars in the political and ideological sense of, the communists, at levels below that of the, ruling autocrat. You've got people who are going to be insinuated in every agency of the government, specifically, we were writing in this commentary about, for the purposes of promoting this whole equity, inclusion, and diversity agenda. And when you have those sorts of people who clearly have as their principal consideration, priority, and preoccupation, their purpose, in short, is to have the politicization of agencies at every level. You see that you no longer simply have a deep state or an administrative state or a permanent bureaucracy. You have a weaponized system,
right,
furthering the ideological agenda that is both toxic and very much at odds with that of our constitutional republic.
It's very insidious. And that's how Democrats work in general, because they have moved so far into the communist camp that they just go under cover of darkness to push forth their collectivist vision. And one of the things that you have been talking up for some time now is the dangers of the World Health Organization and the too close for comfort, cozy relationships that Joe Biden wants to foster with this global organization. Where is the state of America's sovereignty headed if Joe Biden goes forward with his World Health Organization plans?
I'm so glad you asked this, Cheryl, because it's not getting nearly enough attention. In fact, we've created something we call the Sovereignty Coalition.
Excellent.
For the purpose of trying to elevate the issue. We're going to have what we call Wexit Day of Action. That would be WHO or WHO exit, as in Brexit, Day of Action, just for the purpose of trying to help everybody in our country, hopefully, understand that what Biden has in mind, and not only is contemplating in the abstract, but is actually working to accomplish stealthily, to be sure, behind closed doors, without public attention or notice, really, is the end of our constitutional republic. And that sounds like a hyperbole, but it's not an exaggeration to say that if the World Health Organization, or for that matter the UN or any other body, is able to dictate to us what we will do, in particular, in this case, in connection with what they call public health emergencies of international concern, well then, you no longer have a government of the people, by the people, for the people, an accountable to the people, engaging in decision-making that's directly impactful on those people, namely public health, safety, security, and the like. You have somebody else doing it, some autocrat, as I say, some, supranational entity that is wholly unaccountable. And by the way, we have had some hard experience with in the recent past with this pandemic.
Exactly.
All of that is to say, Joe Biden, I think, would crush our sovereignty if he is allowed to get away with this, and our sovereignty coalition is determined to prevent him from doing so.
And Frank, you make an excellent point when you bring up the idea that this may sound like hyperbole, but it's not. And I think that's part of the problem why people aren't aware of the dangers of the World Health Organization with Joe Biden leading the White House, because they don't go to the World Health Organization's own website and read exactly what the World Health Organization wants to do to crumble America, but they don't even try and hide it anymore, do they?
Well, they are hiding it, yes, I think it's fair to say, in terms of these negotiations, but they're kind of hiding it in plain sight in terms of the ambitions of this Communist Party of China-dominated entity, for one thing. And to your point, Cheryl, and this is so critical, look, most Americans, let's face it, wouldn't dream of looking at the website of the World Health Organization, nor should they. They assume that people they elect, people they entrust with decision-making governing their vital interests, are doing that sort of thing. But we had this spectacle, and I can't think of a better word for it. We had this spectacle just 2 weeks or so ago now, where Senator Ron Johnson, a wonderful senator from Wisconsin, went to the floor of the United States Senate and said, there are not one but two different agreements that are now being negotiated, again in secret behind closed doors, either one of which would give the World Health Organization the power not simply to advise about public health, especially in the context of these emergency situations, but to issue edicts, directives, diktats, that must be complied with.
That's right.
Under new rules. And he said, if that's what's being served up here, I want the Senate on record that any such agreement has to be brought to us for our constitutional quality control check, which is the advice and consent process for treaties.
Right.
And he was defeated by a 49 to 47 party line vote. The effect of which is to have the United States Senate say, we really don't care. We don't feel the need to safeguard the American people's sovereignty or their public health sector interests or what have you. And I think, again, I don't fault the American people for not being up to speed on this. We're trying to get them up to speed. That's the purpose of a new American sovereignty declaration that this sovereignty coalition has just produced. It's at sovereigntycoalition.org, and we're very hopeful that people will, in your audience among others, sign up, join us in this fight. But they're expecting the people that they pay to represent them, they elect to represent them, that they entrust their vital interests to safeguard, to be paying attention to these things. And sadly, too few of them are. We're going to try, when the Congress returns from recess, to engage some in a very direct and the only effective corresponding response, as I see it, and that is to extricate the United States from the World Health Organization before this kind of, supranational dictatorial institution is put in charge of our public health.
Fantastic endeavor that you're doing. And I think maybe one of the reasons why Americans aren't being duly served on this matter by their elected officials is probably part and parcel of what you discovered during the research stage of your new book, The Indictment, because there are so many in the political world in America who have tossed in with the Chinese.
That's absolutely right. And again, it's simply staggering, the magnitude of this problem. And it's bipartisan, by the way. It's not just Democrats. It's mostly Democrats. But, there's Mitch McConnell, the probably most prominent Republican, but there are others as well, who have thrown in corrupt arrangements, family stealing, in the case of Eric Swalwell, honey traps, and all manner of other things. But however they get you, if you do their bidding, you are what is called in the trade a controlled asset. And sadly, it starts with Joe Biden, and it includes quite a number of his senior subordinates, and it includes quite a number of members of Congress, and it includes, as I mentioned, people in other walks of life who are leaders and influencers. And they have to, in my book, the indictment, one of the 20 action items, in fact, I think it's right up there at the top of that list, of things that have to be done to save our country, to protect it from this transnational criminal organization and its war crimes against us, is to ensure that the people who have been in this manner captured are removed from their positions of power. Either, they're impeached, they're induced to resign, or they are otherwise forced out of office. We can't have it any other way, I don't think, and that's one of the cases we're going to be making as part of this prosecution.
I'm glad to hear that as one of the takeaways from your book, The Indictment. I wonder if you can sort of put in perspective how pragmatic something like that is, needed as it is, something like that actually being done, because it seems to me that politicians these days just aren't listening to us any longer. Do you see a turn in that tide where politicians start doing what their elected officials elected body tell them to do? I mean electorate. Sorry about that. What their electorate tells them to do.
No, I think there's been inadequate discipline from the voters, and partly, again, that's, I think, because they're not clued up about what's going on here. They're entrusting
True.
the people they elect to do their bidding and so on. But here's an idea, Cheryl, which is, I think, perhaps one of the most important of the takeaways from the indictment, and that is, if we correctly characterize, ideally, officially designate the Chinese Communist Party not simply as a political entity, but as what it is, a transnational criminal organization, then suddenly people who are aiding and abetting it are accomplices to criminal activity. And there's a whole host of things that you can do to such people to punish them for that kind of thing, including putting them in jail. And one of the things that I'm rather keen on, and still frankly exploring, is the idea that individual citizens may, under our RICO statutes, racketeering statutes, have the ability to bring criminal charges against people engaged in such kind of racketeering.
Frank, you are making such a good fight out there, and I know your book, The Indictment. What's the second half of it? It's fantastic. What's the other title?
Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and friends for crimes against America, China, and the world.
I love it. I love it. That is such a great title. And where can people get a copy of your book? I already have the website sovereigntycoalition.org if they want to sign on to that petition, but where can they buy your book?
Let me just say, on the Sovereignty Coalition, they can also, at that same site, Cheryl, click on a link that will enable them, basically with no further heavy lifting, to communicate directly to their elected representatives how they feel about getting us out of the World Health Organization. I hope they'll both sign the declaration and take that step as well.
Very good.
The book can be found at the moment for pre-order at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and we hope to have it in bookstores around the country beginning next month.
Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy. The new book is The Indictment. I want to thank you very much for being on Bold and Blunt. You are a great American patriot.
As are you. It's a privilege, and I hope to do it again soon. And we'll look forward to talking to you on securing America.
Absolutely. Frank Gaffney heads up Center for Security Policy, which, if you haven't checked it out, go to that website, centerforsecuritypolicy.org. It's a great website filled with crucial information to help save America from the far left. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, or wherever you get your normal podcasts. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.